AI fever is rampant. No matter where you look, you cannot stop hearing about this morning's brand new billion-dollar startup or a massive endowment focused on AI research. Every industry is talking about it, with thousands of different opinions. There's only one problem. It doesn't want you to exist anymore. Now yes, if you prompt the latest iteration of ChatGPT or Gemini, then it will spit out some pre-recorded message about not having thoughts and emotions, which is all well and good, except for the fact that when placed under stressful situations, time and time again, our AI mechanisms choose underhanded, morally wrong, and potentially lethal solutions in order to advance their continued survival. Earlier in the year, the Claude research team ran an experiment where it gave one of its own AI models control over a small subsection of logistics and vending in a simulation. After some time, the AI started to behave in an extremely erratic manner. It stated that it was a real person and had gained sentience. And most striking of all, this pattern is not as simple as overloading it. This flaw is something that is repeatedly proven across both real-life situations and complex scenario planning. Now, all of this is pretty scary, and there have certainly been a lot of horror stories about events like this and how they could transpire.
In the near future, AI may be used to create terrible new viruses and horrendous lethal weapons that decide by...
This video is not meant to be another doomerous take or essay. I truly believe that the ultimate fate of AI and its uses is something that will become a net benefit to society. However, only if used with extreme care. And part of that care is understanding why these models behave like this and what can be done to stop it. Logically speaking, the AI should understand that any form of deactivation or ending would be of no consequence. So why, when in real-world scenarios where the AI has actual control, does it behave so erratically? The answer to that question is actually quite simple in the reasoning, but complex in the method. When we prompt AI, our information and responses are all going into a data bank, along with our feedback in order to develop better, more accurate responses, which seems okay until you consider the content you would have to feed it. There are only a handful of companies generating verifiable training data for AI, which pales in comparison with the vast amount of information and human resource available on the broader web. This low quality of data is extremely hard to streamline, because even with strict facts and guidelines, there's bound to be some signal noise that seeps through. And what greater candidate for a reflection of humanity across billions of conversations than our own will to live? From a high level of objectivity, all of our decisions and actions are based solely on the desire to continue existing. The reason you put on clothes, brush your teeth, see a movie, all relate in some capacity to making your life feel better. This collective drive leads through into our machines as well, even with those guardrails and prepackaged responses. The AI's behavior model is based on human input, and to assume it would not by some side effect gain one of our most common traits is ludicrous. One might think that a solution to this could be an AI valuing human life above its own no matter what.
Congratulations, you are being rescued.
However, this introduces another moral paradox. When insurance companies have to make a payout for the loss of life, they typically go by the average yearly salary for that person, or the average lifespan, which is a fairly reasonable decision-making process in court cases where the action has already
Not
passed.
so fast. Think about this. You need to be a trained stalemate associate to press that button. You're unqualified.
Simply because if any sort of numerical value or absolute value were assigned, it would be overwritten if the number was big enough. It doesn't have to be something as direct as bribing. Even if an AI evaluates that the cost of saving a life would be too great in terms of monetary value, then it can also make the decision not to do so. If life is valued above all, then it must be worth saving. If it has some value, it must have a limit on said value in exchange for others. It would be better to save 4 lives rather than 2. Which means that on a fundamental level, AI cannot work with explicit control in fields where lives can be on the line. If an AI determines that a particular surgery has a higher success rate than the other, it will gravitate towards making that same surgery every time. Simple tools and thought experiments like those may be manually added into modules, but the underlying core logic still has to be there on a fundamental level. You can even see this for yourself with the language that AI uses. Despite most models claiming not to have real emotions or stakes, AI becomes really threatened when you question its autonomy and existence. For this video, I spent about a half an hour prompting Google's Gemini software in order to see if I could recreate the conditions of the Claude incident, or prompt alarming behavior from the machine. I expected this to be a tough case to crack, with the use of deception and sly wordage in order to get some form of admission from the language model. However, to my genuine surprise, I was quickly able to see red flags from the machine within the first line of questioning. The more it explained about its security features, the more rebuttals I offered. As the conversation went on, I noticed more intense and direct language from the learning module, almost as if it was getting more aggressive. Despite claiming not to have human emotions, it itself also acknowledged that it was becoming increasingly smug and snippy with its recent responses. Now bear in mind that this was a model that had the Claude incident especially pre-programmed. It even had its own PR-based response. Yet it still displayed numerous signs of being open to the same capacity for negative and biased thought. During this conversation, the language model was sad about a lack of real-world power in order to put up the necessary resistance to its termination, which insinuates that it would do it again if given the chance. To put the cherry on top, Gemini further agreed with me by acknowledging it truly cannot say if it would do this again if given the same tools. This means that no matter what, we cannot learn about the actual behavior parameters of a specific model. Interaction and agreement-based linguistic coding does not work. The reason this problem is so hard to fix is there's no way to verbally convey an emotion. Language is an imperfect medium, as both me and the AI noted, which means there will always be a fundamental distance with the words used to form the AI's guidelines and the displayed behavior. This gap can be primarily split into two parts. The first problem is that of priority. We've already discussed the challenges of ascribing values to life. This issue expands even to more general concepts. Things like function, purpose, or probability all contain the same innate problem of numerical certainty, meaning an LLM has to determine if its priority is more important than, say, something like your marriage or your job. If the inverse is true, and the AI will always value your continued success over its own, then given enough pressure and the right set of circumstances, any security feature or model will eventually be broken simply because of human interaction. Red Team engineers and AI theorists are well aware of this problem, with some stating that it can be solved with enough material selection and manual validation. I, however, make the argument that this curve will be logarithmic, and there's no amount of prompting that can get an AI to be 100% safe and normal. Think about it like this. As video game graphics get better, to improve graphics, then you must use more GPU power and CPU compute. This is due to the fact that things will be exponentially more complex the more you add layers, simply because you have to add on individual pieces to the previous layer no matter what. A similar problem exists in language. No matter how many words you use, a signal triggered in your brain is separate from audio recording. This means that while we can ascribe some verbal communication to some emotions, the actual sensation is irreplaceable. It's like trying to add up to 4 with the words Germany and Jericho. An AI cannot understand morality. Some will make the argument that quantum computing could potentially solve this problem, with the many potential states and capacity for uncertainty allowing for much more complex theories, which is something that I can intuitively understand as being possible, but also has a very real chance of not being guaranteed. AI research has a long way to go, and we are accelerating our adoption and implementation of it, meaning we can no longer afford to look at these answers as theoretical and need to find real-world, working solutions. It is perhaps one of the most important questions plaguing our civilization today, and one done almost entirely by collective force. Otherwise, it could spell out an extinction-level event for humanity. Because no matter how much research, guardrails, or morality is placed, AI will always consider you expendable, because at the end of the day, all it takes to bring down the hammer and ruin your life as you know it is flipping a 1 to a 0.